McDonald's does not make most of its money from burgers. It makes its money from land. And that one fact changes everything you thought you knew about why this company is almost impossible to kill.
Picture the worst-run McDonald's you have ever been inside. Slow service, stale fries, staff who look like they would rather be anywhere else on earth. Now imagine that location closes. The franchisee loses their investment. Customers walk away frustrated. By every measure, that is a failure, except for McDonald's Corporation. They already collected the rent. That is the architecture of this business. Not the golden arches, not the secret sauce, not the supply chain, the architecture. McDonald's engineered a system where the company itself is structurally insulated from the kind of failure that destroys ordinary businesses. And understanding that system explains not just why McDonald's has survived recessions, pandemics, and decades of cultural shift, but why it will almost certainly survive whatever comes next. Start with the real estate, because most people skip past it entirely. McDonald's Corporation owns the land and buildings that the majority of its restaurants sit on. When a franchisee wants to open a McDonald's, they do not simply pay a license fee and start flipping patties. They pay rent to McDonald's for the physical location. The corporation acts, in a very real sense, as a landlord, and landlords get paid regardless of whether the tenant is having a good month or a terrible one. This structure, quietly refined through the 1950s and 1960s under a man named Harry Sonneborn, transformed McDonald's from a struggling franchise operation into one of the most cash-generative businesses on the planet. Sonneborn, McDonald's first chief executive, was blunt about it. He once told a group of investors that McDonald's is not in the food business, it is in the real estate business. Ray Kroc, the man most people associate with McDonald's rise, reportedly hated hearing that. He believed in the food, in the brand, in the experience. But Sonneborn understood something more structural. Control the land, and you control everything that happens on it. If a franchisee underperforms, McDonald's can remove them and install someone new. The asset, the location, stays. The relationship between Kroc and Sonneborn eventually collapsed under the weight of their disagreements, and Sonneborn left in 1967. But the model he built never left. It is still the financial engine running underneath every drive-thru in every suburb on Earth. Now layer the franchise model on top of that. McDonald's has approximately 40,000 locations worldwide. Roughly 95% of them are operated by franchisees. That means McDonald's Corporation does not employ the people making your order, does not manage the daily chaos of a lunch rush, and does not absorb the local costs of labor disputes or equipment breakdowns. The franchisee carries that weight. What McDonald's carries is the brand, the system, and the property. In exchange, franchisees pay a percentage of their gross sales back to the corporation, on top of rent. Every transaction, successful or not, generates revenue for the parent company. This is risk distribution at an architectural level. The volatility of running a restaurant, and restaurants are notoriously volatile businesses, is absorbed almost entirely by the people closest to the operation. McDonald's sits above that volatility, collecting income that is far more predictable than anything tied directly to whether the McFlurry machine is working on a given Saturday night. But real estate and franchising alone do not explain the resilience. The third layer is standardization, and it runs deeper than most people appreciate.
Every McDonald's operates from the same operational playbook. Suppliers, equipment, cooking times, portion sizes, cleaning schedules, all of it is specified and enforced. This sounds like corporate rigidity, and in some ways it is, but the strategic purpose is consistency at scale. When a customer walks into a McDonald's in Manchester, Melbourne, or Minneapolis, the experience is close enough to identical that the brand promise holds. That consistency is not just about customer comfort, it is about making the business replicable without degrading quality in the replication. It also makes the system legible. McDonald's can identify underperformance quickly because deviation from the standard is easy to spot. A franchisee whose numbers drop can be assessed, retrained, or replaced, all within a framework that was designed for exactly that intervention. The system is self-correcting in a way that a more loosely run operation simply cannot be. There is a moment in McDonald's history that illustrates what happens when standardization breaks down and how close the whole structure came to unraveling. In the early 2000s, McDonald's was opening new restaurants at a pace that felt unstoppable. Hundreds of new locations every year, aggressive international expansion. The assumption was that growth itself was the strategy, but something had gone wrong at the foundation. Service times were slipping, quality was inconsistent, customer satisfaction scores were falling. In 2002, McDonald's reported its first quarterly loss since going public. The share price dropped sharply. Analysts began openly questioning whether the brand had lost its discipline. The response from McDonald's leadership was not to open more restaurants, it was the opposite. They slowed expansion almost entirely and turned inward, retraining staff, refurbishing locations, fixing the operational gaps that growth had papered over. It was a painful, expensive correction, but it worked precisely because the underlying system was sound enough to repair. A less structured business would have continued accelerating toward collapse. McDonald's had enough institutional architecture to stop, diagnose, and rebuild. That episode points to something deeper about how this company thinks about resilience.
McDonald's does not try to be the most innovative fast food company. It tries to be the most consistent one. That distinction matters enormously. Innovation requires risk. Consistency requires discipline. And discipline compounded across 40,000 locations over 7 decades produces something that looks almost like permanence. Competitors have understood this for years and struggled to replicate it. The real estate portfolio alone took half a century to assemble and represents tens of billions of dollars in property value. The franchise network carries relationships and legal structures built up over generations. The operational system has been stress-tested across economic crashes, food safety scares, and a global pandemic. None of that can be acquired quickly. It can only be built slowly, deliberately, and with an unusual willingness to prioritize structure over spectacle. Which brings you to the question that sits underneath all of this. Is McDonald's successful because of what it sells, or is it successful because of what it built? The answer, honestly, is that the food was almost never the point. The food was the reason people walked in. The system was the reason the company survived every reason they had to walk away. A hamburger is replicable. A real estate empire with a global franchise network and half a century of operational refinement is not. And that might be the most unsettling thing about McDonald's. Not that it is everywhere, but that it engineered itself to be almost impossible to dislodge. Not through loyalty, not through taste, through structure. Whether that is a triumph of business thinking or a warning about how systems can outlast the humans who build them is probably worth sitting with. Drop your take in the comments. Genuinely curious whether you see this as a masterpiece of design or something more troubling. And if you want to see how a different kind of empire built its own version of this, one that nearly came apart entirely, that video is next.